Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and it's time to start up with the Mark II of the Tales of Iron Man in the Tales of Suspense. Anyway, let's get talking about it. You already know I'm going to be going over most of the armors case by case by case. In this particular case, we're going to be looking at issues number 40 through 48 of Tales of Suspense because hells to the yes. All right, so let's get started. We have actually got the writer is Stan Lee. Now that's the he's more of the plot guy as opposed to the script guy. So he comes up with a couple little plots and says, "Hey, it'd be cool if bang, 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 bang," and then somebody else comes along and actually goes into detail of writing these things and the drawing and all that good stuff there. So we've got the individual scripter, the writer on this is Robert Bernstein. Now, Robert Bernstein is a interesting character. He actually died he was born on May 23rd of 1919 and he died in 1988. So sad, but he's been in a lot of comic books. He wrote for Archie Comics, AC Comics, EC, yeah, the horror stuff, DC Comics, Timely Atlas, and Marvel. In Marvel, he mostly just simply wrote the anthology comic books, and typically not the more popular of those stories in the anthology comic books. He usually wrote like some of the later stuff. Here he got to write Iron Man, which is cool, but like in the Tales to Astonish, he wouldn't have necessarily been writing Thor. You know what I'm saying? Maybe he wrote something else instead that nobody cares about for the most part, but it is what it is. Did his job, did it well, and these stories were mostly enjoyable because of him. But it is what it is. The penciler in these books was Jack Kirby, while the inker was Don Heck. The colorist, Stan Goldberg, and the letterer, Artie Simek. Feel free to go and look at my short biography of Artie Simek, letterer extraordinaire. Okay, so the Mark II armor is classified as that golden armor, the Golden Avenger armor. At one point, they try to push the Golden Gladiator. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. But anyway, there is the Marvel database, which I'm not as active on as I used to be, but I have done a lot of work for them and I do respect the Marvel database, which is a free resource online for you to look up things. The trick is they don't agree with me on what the Mark II is. See, they still consider the Golden Avenger armor to be a Mark I, but it's not. There are many differences between the gray armor and the golden armor. See, in issue number 40 of Tales of Suspense, which is the one we're starting on, which had a cover date of April of 1963, there were several differences that this armor had. So we started with the gray armor in this issue, but only for a little while, and it looks like, just to the casual observer, that all Tony Stark did was he decided to paint. He basically spray paint with a varnish-free golden paint, and it's the exact same deal with the armor. But that's not the case at all. There were radical differences to this. Minor differences was that there was a 200-mile-per-hour jet skate on it. There was a searchlight on the front. You could have an anti-magnetic alloy interwoven with the armor. But the three main parts of this was that this was indeed painted gold. There was also a force field introduced to the armor, and not a regular force field would repel bullets and the like, but it did repel certain objects. So, force field, first armor that would do that, and most importantly, this was the first foldable suit. Now, the original gray armor was not foldable, and of course, it doesn't make a lot of sense that he creates something out of scraps, a bucket of scraps, as Obadiah Stane would say in the original Iron Man movie. But, it just doesn't make any sense that he would continue using that one that he essentially built in a freaking cave someplace. You know what I'm saying? He would want to upgrade it in any way he possibly could, and he did. This new suit was actually able to fold up and fit inside of his briefcase, but it would get solid when he wanted it to. In fact, he had to always keep the chest plate on him, otherwise he would die. So there's actually several times in this series, the Tales of Suspense with the golden armor, where he would say, "Don't bring me to a hospital, even though I probably have a massive concussion. Don't bring me to hospital." And internally, he would admit, is because if they see me with this iron chest plate on, the gig is up, you know? So anyway, it would just look like it would be something that would fit under a shirt normally when he didn't have his armor proper on, but when he did throw his armor on, it would solidify and get a lot bulkier. And it often looked like he was droopy and just kind of, you know what I'm saying, hanging down and whatnot. And it's a real freaking shame. But it is what it is. Anyway, so this is, in fact, the Mark II. And while most people acknowledge that this is the Mark II, even though the Marvel database doesn't, Marvel itself also recognizes this golden armor as the Mark II, specifically for the reasons, previously mentioned. Okay, so with issue number 40, it's actually a really fun issue. There's 4 stories in here. This is just one of them. And actually, it's 2 of them, technically. There's supposed to be 4 stories in here, but Iron Man takes the place of 2 of these stories, and then the other 2 stories are, half the size each of the main Iron Man story. And this one is Iron Man versus Gargantus. Basically, it's these little green men that we never see again, but they have beaks. They almost look like Tomar Reeve from the Green Lantern universe in DC Comics, except they're green. And what happens? They decide they're going to try and conquer the Earth, but the last time they were here was like 20 million years ago, something like that. I forget what it was, where Neanderthals ruled the Earth. Now it's, a different form of hominid, and we're not interested in these big things anymore. But, they try to go over like state rights and more specifically township rights. Can you, break into someone's home? Can you, enter if someone builds a wall around their city? Can you get away with it? I think all of this was supposed to be in Monaco. Also, there was a woman in here because they're really trying to play up in the idea that Tony Stark is this totally, hot dude that all the ladies are into. Anyway, there's a woman in here called Jean or Jeannie, and I believe it's supposed to be Jeannie Moreau. She's actually a very famous actress who died July 31st, 2017 in Paris. Monaco is actually in Paris. Monaco is the second smallest city in the world, only bigger than the Holy See, which is the capital of, well, the only area where the Catholics actually dominate. So, and that's actually within Rome. Rome itself is within Italy, so go figure. Anyway, Monaco, yeah, huge casino there. Huge casino there. So anyway, yeah, that. So this was a very fun comic book in the sense that Tony Stark actually did a couple things that later on he would explain. Look, I loved these comic books, and I probably would have been way more into Iron Man when I was younger if more comics would have been like this. But even the next issue isn't like this one. He actually goes and he checks to see, hey, something's happening, but here's this cloud, but the wind is moving, and I checked it, so that's really weird, everything that's happening here. And he's able to reveal that these aliens are hiding behind this cloud that was manufactured because the wind would have pushed it away, the cloud away otherwise, but it didn't. So that's when he realized what it was, and Gargantus was essentially just a giant robot. So fun time. Okay, the next issue number 41 of Tales of Suspense, in May of 1963, features the first appearance of Doctor Strange. Wait a second, before you start going to eBay and freaking out, this is also the only appearance of Doctor Strange. This is not the Doctor Strange that you know, Surgeon Supreme or Sorcerer Supreme. That's not him. All right, that's not Dr. Stephen Strange. This is Dr. Carlo Strange and his daughter, Carla Strange. And basically, there's a guy who claims to be the master of electricity. Gee, we won't see that again anytime soon. But this guy's supposed to be the master of electricity, and he's a super scientist. He's figured out a bunch of things, and nobody messes with him, except for Iron Man, who beats him. And now nobody wants to mess with Iron Man, except they do. Anyway, this really was a fun one. I enjoyed this. In fact, I liked the character of Dr. Strange in here so much, Dr. Carlo Strange, that I would like to see a story between, with a battle between him and Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme. Stephen Strange. I think that would actually be a lot of fun. If they did it right, it could be. But this is the only appearance of this character. So, is what it is. So, moving on to the next issue, we have got Tales of Suspense, issue number 42. Now, this one's called Trapped by the Red Barbarian. Okay, this is the first appearance of the actor in this book, Andrei Rostov. And we think that he dies in here, but no, he doesn't. He, what do you call it? Gregory, first appearance here, first appearance of the Red Barbarian, but we will see a lot of these characters again. The actor, in and of himself, he does actually die in this, but hey, anybody could show up again. It's Marvel. It's the comic books. So this is basically just a guy, much like the chameleon for Spider-Man, where you can just change the outward appearance of his face, and he's going to try and ruin Iron Man in multiple ways, and clearly he doesn't. But Tales of Suspense, issue number 43. Okay, this one's kind of cool. This basically has the first appearance of the Netherworld and the Netherworlders. So at the time, they're saying that this is Atlantis, but they changed the name. Well, Netherworld is actually going to stay because they're going to make it as a part of Atlantis that was actually sealed, while the rest of them weren't sealed. So I really dug on this issue. I wanted to make fun of it. I wanted to skip over it. I was really tired when I was trying to read it that night, and I was like, no. Let me go back and read it again later. And I did. I'm really glad that I did. A lot of history in this one, and I definitely enjoyed it. Let's get talking about issue number 44 of Tales of Suspense with a cover date of August 1963. So this one wasn't great. It is what it is. Basically, Tony Stark goes back in time as Iron Man and saves Cleopatra, and they wind up falling in love with each other, but they can't stay with each other because reasons. Issue number 45 of Tales of Suspense, however, is a fun one. The Icy Fingers of Jack Frost. Yes, this is the first appearance of Jack Frost, but more importantly, I would think, is actually the first appearance of the prototype for the Blizzard armor. Blizzard, a very popular, especially during the Iron Wars comics, but a very popular Tony Stark villain, right along with Force. He was actually in the same running circles. Issue number 46 is a pretty important one. However, let me go back really quick to issue number 45. I do apologize for that. While this is the first appearance of Jack Frost, and it's also the first appearance of what would retcon to be considered the prototype for the Blizzard armor, two very important characters actually show up in here. One of them is Happy Hogan. The other one is Pepper Potts. If you are a collector, I would definitely consider trying to get this one. Even in crappy, lousy shape, it's still going to be worth something. I mean, it's already worth something, but it could, of course, wind up being worth a whole lot more. So just consider. Anyhow, that was a fun one. Now we get to another Master of Electricity, and that's in issue number 46 of Tales of Suspense, October 1963. You see the Crimson Dynamo shows up for the very first time ever. That's right, first appearance of the Crimson Dynamo, Anton Vanko. So basically he's the Master of Electricity. He's like, I'm going to destroy Stark because, I'm a commie, and commies are supposed to destroy Americans, and he's basically my rival. And no, he's not. But it is what it is. He's got to try and impress Khrushchev because, reasons. Anyway, this was still a fun one. I do have to acknowledge something, though. The typical tropes for villains back in the day were, what they've been doing in this comic book and others, where the villain is afraid usually to face the hero directly at first. So he'll hide in the woods or around a corner or something like that in order to stay out of the sight of the good guy. In this particular case, it goes the exact opposite way. What do you call it? Crimson Dynamo decides to hide in the woods, but it's so obvious that it's him. It's so painfully obvious. It's like, listen, man, let's just be realistic about this, okay? If you are bright red, you are not hiding in the woods. That's just not going to happen, okay? You could think that you will, but you won't, okay? It's kind of like, if you're poor and when you were younger, maybe now, you walk into a room, you turn on a light, and on the big white wall, here's a freaking cockroach, right? All the other cockroaches ran. They got out of Dodge, but this one thinks that he's freaking Batman Ninja Roach. You know what I'm saying? He's like, you can't see me. I'm invisible. What do you do with that rolled up newspaper? I'm saying, you know what I'm saying? This guy sticks out like a sore freaking thumb with a, I'm going to hide behind this tree, behind this bush. They're all always hiding behind the trees, afraid to face Tony Stark and the good guy, essentially, at first. But essentially, or eventually, the villains will, you know, gain their confidence and they'll go out and be able to face him directly. Or someone will just sneak right up and try and whack him on the back of the head, whatever. In this particular case, seeing the Crimson Dynamo acting the same way was just a bit above the norm. Like, he is super freaking huge. He's not going to be sneaky, and he's bright red. Come on, man. You can't ninja somebody like that. So anyway, this was a fun one also because you have the Red Scare on full assault here, and Crimson Dynamo actually goes and blows up. He overcharges a bunch of the that's what they call the overcharging or short circuiting Tony's manufacturing plants. At one point, at one point, the Crimson Dynamo's like, "How come my device won't work on you? How come I can't overcharge your uniform?" "That's all right. I'll charge the electricity at your feet." Really, on the dirt ground, you can do that? I mean, like, are there tree branches or roots underneath? Because then I can maybe see it. But like, what are you doing? You're just gonna shoot the ground? That's never gonna work. It doesn't matter because Tony Stark flies up. He starts flying all around. He's like, you can be as tough as you want, but you can't defy the laws of science. And I almost stared my eyes out. Like, why? Why would you even say something like that? This comic book is not scientific at all. But I did learn a lot by going back and reading these comic books today. So that was issue number 46. Let's take a look at issue number 47. This is November of 1963, and this is the first appearance of a soon-to-be Masters of Evil member, the Melter. Basically, the Melter is this guy who used to work for, or not work for, sorry, he had his own place, but they lost their military contract because, well, he was a butthead. Anyway, this is the first appearance of the Melter, Bruno Horgan. Excuse me. And he has the ability to, with this portable melter that he has, it was originally this device that he can move around up top that was meant to do detection and things like that, but he realized that it can effortlessly melt iron. And it doesn't do it with heat, it does it in some other kind of way. So if you're standing right in front of him, you should technically be okay. But yeah, I wouldn't play around with that. Apparently Iron Man doesn't want to play with that either. But this thing they're showing on the cover with him getting his left arm burned off, that really does happen. His armor does get, melted off him, and there's nothing that he can do about it. But hey, anyway, fun enough character, and I like the little limitation of he decided to put it here instead of walk around with it here, So his aiming isn't going to be that great, but it is what it is. Anyway, in the next issue, issue number 48, that's when he dons his Mark III armor. And I'm going to get into all that stuff, but, usually we talk about the most important story for Iron Man with this particular armor on. But we don't get a whole lot of really great ones, and there's not a lot to choose from. The best you could really do, in my opinion, would be the Crimson Dynamo one. However, there are actually 2 more appearances of Iron Man in this Golden Avenger armor. You guessed it. That would be in Avengers issue number 1 and 2. Issue number 2, he's against the Space Pirate. That's where the Hulk leaves the team. But everybody gets formed in this one because Loki's the main bad guy, and it's way too much for Thor to handle by himself, apparently. I'm okay with that. But yeah, they've got to handle Loki. And it's a fun one. It's a genuinely fun one. Seeing the team come together for the first time. Iron Man's never been more mopey. Like, I'm Iron Man. I have to beat up the bad guys. Bring it. So, yeah. Glad that didn't quite go the way that it was supposed to. But all that being said, that would have to be the most important of the Golden Avenger version of Iron Man, the Iron Man Mark II armor. It's definitely the most memorable. All these other ones were fun, but they just weren't, oh my God. Okay, so here's something that I realized and I learned about myself, is that I'm more forgiving with these older school comic books than I am with the modern day comic books. I think it's because I have grown so much. I also learned a lot about engineering, when I was younger, that it helps when you actually do engineering. That being said, The science in these books are horrible, and yet here I am giving myself giving these books a free pass because while they were written at the time, while I understand these guys weren't scientists, I understand yada yada yada. The comic books that are written today, I guess naturally judging them harsher because well I'm older now and I expect that the comic book should be made for me. But I think that more often than not, I need to learn how to just step back and chill and just let the comic book happen. Because when push comes to shove, if you can give a free pass to these books, which are just, let's be realistic, well, some of the stories can be good. These are terribly written books, terribly done books, terrible art, terrible everything. I would never judge these books positively if it was my first time coming to these books. And that's kind of important to think about. The story, everything, it's all, for the most part, very flimsy, and yet I loved it because it's nostalgia. It's going back and seeing the origins of these characters again. I enjoyed these books. I really did. And I'm hoping that I can remember when this cooties outbreak right now that's causing us all to be in a pandemic where we're stuck indoors for months on end. I'm hoping that I can remember to kind of tame my expectations for the books because these original issues weren't that great when you go back and give them a reread. They're just not. And it's a shame, but it's a learning experience. And I'm more than happy to learn from this particular learning experience. Anyway, guys, I did enjoy these books. I think that you guys will too. If you can get your hands on some of these older stories, on like let's say a Marvel Masterworks and the like, you are not going to regret it. Also consider getting those 2 Avengers issues or all of those original Avengers issues. You got to remember how important the Avengers actually were. There was never really a team like this that had their own individual stories and got together. I mean, you could say Justice League, but it's almost like they expected these, right? But in this story, like the individual, as opposed to, here's their individual stories, here's their team book, as in the Justice League. Yeah, that's cute, and never the twain shall mix for the most part. In this particular case with Marvel, when the Avengers all meet together, they actually started paying attention and said, you can't have Stark do such and such because he's over with the Avengers Mansion right now. So think of something else to do and some other way for him to, give himself that life-saving charge, right? So, and these really made for more stories to be developed, better stories to potentially be developed. But, it is what it is. So I'm enjoying all of these. I'm going to continue enjoying them because I am taking a trip down memory road. I haven't read these Iron Man comic books in forever, and some of them I've clearly missed, We didn't all have digital back then. But I'm going to keep on trekking through these and reading them. I highly recommend that you consider reading them too because they are definitely worth it. Consider checking out the description for more and the previous and the next videos to see the Iron Man armors in a row. And hey, consider giving a like if you actually got something valuable out of this content. And if you want to, kind of throw something back at me, I'm not saying pull out your wallet. No, simply allow an ad to play if an ad shows up on my channel or any of your favorite YouTubers' channels, because that is the only way that YouTube pays its creators. That's right, we don't get paid in views, we don't get paid in likes, we don't get paid in subscriptions. We get paid by somebody actually allowing an ad to play, whether you watch it or not. So please consider. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for me. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.